Evelyn Carter woke early on a Saturday with the soft light of dawn slipping through her bedroom curtains. She lay in bed for a moment, listening to the faint hum of distant traffic and the gentle chirping of birds. Her home felt quiet in a way it never had before her husband, Samuel, passed away 2 years earlier. In those days, Samuel would rise even earlier than her, sip his coffee quietly at the kitchen table, and then step outside to tend to the yard. He took great pride in their small patch of grass, carefully trimming the edges, pulling out stray weeds, and planting flowers in neat rows along the front walk. Evelyn missed watching him in his old straw hat, humming a familiar tune as he worked. Now the grass in front of her house had grown tall, and she felt a knot of worry every time she looked at it. It seemed to grow faster than she could keep up, especially during the warm months when rain and sun coaxed it into a lush green carpet. With Samuel gone, she simply did not have the strength or energy to maintain the yard as he had. She carried aches and pains that made bending and pushing a heavy mower feel like too much to bear. She swung her legs over the side of the bed, her feet brushing against the cool hardwood floor. She wrapped a soft robe around her shoulders and shuffled to the bathroom mirror. In the reflection, she saw her own hair, now streaked with silver, and her gentle face marked by the passage of time. Wrinkles traced along her smile lines, a reminder of countless days spent laughing with her husband and hosting family gatherings. She touched her fingers to the spot where a small scar remained from childbirth years ago. It had been a different kind of worry then. Today, it was sorrow. She took a deep breath and made her way to the kitchen, where she had left a note taped to the counter the night before. Lawn service arrives at 9 a.m. Don't forget to ask him to trim the edges. She had heard an advertisement on the radio for a new local lawn team, and she had called the number when she realized she could not delay the yard work any longer. She was both relieved and uneasy about the idea of someone she did not know setting foot on her property, tending to what had once been Samuel's domain. She placed 2 small glasses on a tray, one for herself and one to offer her visitor. She filled them with chilled water and set them aside, hoping the day would go smoothly. The clock on the kitchen wall ticked steadily as she wandered through the house, opening windows to let in the fresh morning air. She paused at the living room window and looked out onto the front yard. The grass was tall enough that it brushed the bottom of the porch steps. Dandelions had spread their yellow heads across patches of green, and a small tuft of grass had taken hold between 2 cracks in the sidewalk. Evelyn felt a pang of guilt as she thought of the neighbors, who might think she had become too old or too forgetful to care for her property. She brushed away a stray tear and turned back inside. She decided to make a small breakfast, 2 slices of buttered toast and a cup of tea, to fortify herself before the lawn care began. As she spread butter on the warm bread, she remembered the mornings she and Samuel had spent together, him tending the lawn and her preparing coffee and breakfast for them to share. Those were simple, happy times, but they were gone now. At precisely 9 o'clock, Evelyn heard the rumble of an engine and the faint drone of a lawnmower approaching. She set down her mug of tea, wiped her hands on her robe, and walked slowly toward the front door. Her heart fluttered as she opened it. Standing on the sidewalk was a young man she had never met before. He wore a clean, light blue uniform with a small emblem on the chest that read Green Thumb Lawn Care. He was tall and carried himself with an easy confidence. His skin was a warm brown color, and his eyes shone with kindness as he greeted her. "Good morning, ma'am," he said politely, his voice low and smooth. "I'm Kofi. I'll be mowing your lawn today." "Good morning," Evelyn replied, her voice soft but steady. She managed a small smile. "Thank you for coming. I'm Evelyn Carter." She extended her hand slightly and Kofi shook it gently, careful and respectful. His grip was firm but not rough. "It's my pleasure," he said, nodding. "Your yard doesn't look too bad, but I see it could use a good trim." She gestured toward the overgrown grass. "My husband used to take care of it himself, but he passed away 2 years ago. I'm afraid I just can't manage it like he did." Kofi's expression changed to one of sympathy. "I'm sorry for your loss. I'll be sure to give it the attention it needs." She felt tears prick at her eyes and quickly blinked them away. "Thank you." Would you like some water? Or tea before you start? I have something chilled in the kitchen. That offer seemed to surprise him slightly, but he nodded gratefully. Tea would be lovely, ma'am, if that's all right. He followed her inside, and she led him into the cozy kitchen. The morning sun streamed through the lace curtains, casting gentle patterns on the wooden floor. She took one of the glasses she had filled earlier, poured iced tea into it, and handed it to him. The coolness of the glass touched her palm as she set her own mug of warm tea on the table. He sat down at the small round table by the window, and she handed him the glass. Thank you, he said, his voice genuine. He took a sip and looked around the room. The walls were filled with family photos. One of her and Samuel on their wedding day, smiling broadly, another with their 3 children, all grown now, and a picture from years ago showing Samuel wearing that straw hat as he worked on the lawn. Evelyn followed his gaze and felt a lump in her throat. The memories washed over her, some sweet, some painful. I recognize your house from years ago, she said, trying to keep her voice steady. We've lived here for nearly 40 years. My husband built the flower beds himself and planted those oak trees in the backyard. He put a lot of love into this home. Kofi nodded, setting his tea aside. It's a beautiful place. I'm honored to help keep it looking nice for you. She nodded and took a deep breath. Well, I won't keep you. It's your job, after all. She stood up and smoothed her robe. The mower is in the shed on the left. Feel free to use any tools you need. He followed her outside, and she watched as he walked to the shed, grabbed a gas can, and opened the mower to pour fuel into the tank. He wore gloves, sturdy work boots, and a cap to shade his eyes from the sun. Evelyn admired the care he took, making sure everything was set just right before he fired up the engine. The mower roared to life, and he guided it across the lawn in straight lines, the blades cutting through the tall grass in even swaths. From her spot on the front porch, Evelyn sat down in a wooden rocking chair. The chair creaked softly as she settled in. She wrapped her hands around the mug of tea, feeling its warmth seep into her palms. As she watched Kofi mow, memories of Samuel flooded her mind. She remembered how he would whistle an old gospel song as he worked, his movements steady and practiced. She remembered offering him lemonade on hot afternoons, and he would grin at her with that gentle smile that made her heart flutter, even after 40 years of marriage. She closed her eyes for a moment and let a soft sigh escape her lips. She thought about the day she had called the lawn service. It had taken courage to pick up the phone and admit she needed help. For a long time after Samuel died, she had tried to do everything herself, afraid to ask for help or feel like she was losing a piece of the life they had built together. But the grass had become a jungle, and the flower beds he had tended so carefully were overrun with weeds. She had worried neighbors would come looking for her, thinking something was wrong inside her home. She finally called a few services, and Green Thumb Lawn Care had given her the best rate. She had scheduled the appointment, then spent the week wondering what it would feel like to have a stranger in her yard. Now, as she watched Kofi work, she felt both relief and a pang of sadness. She felt relief because she no longer had to fear that her home would look neglected. She felt sadness because Samuel would have been here, as he always had been, tending to every blade of grass. The sound of the mower reminded her of the soft hum of Samuel's old mower, the one he had rebuilt himself years ago after it broke down. She missed his gentle voice, his quiet presence, and the way he would tap the side of his hat to scratch an itch before leaning down to pull out a weed by hand. She missed the way he called her, "my sunshine," when she stepped onto the porch to bring him lemonade. She opened her eyes and watched as Kofi finished a pass with the mower and then knelt down to trim the stubborn grass along the edge of the driveway. He used a small trimmer, cutting precise lines between the concrete and the lawn. She could see the concentration on his face, the careful way he held the trimmer to avoid nicking the driveway. Every once in a while, he glanced toward the porch, as if checking that she was doing okay. Evelyn felt a warmth in her chest at his consideration. She realized that even though Kofi was a stranger, he was treating her home with the respect and care she remembered from Samuel. That thought made her feel a flicker of comfort, something she had not felt in a long time. After a while, Kofi paused, turned off the trimmer, and picked up a broom. He swept away stray clippings that had fallen onto the sidewalk, working slowly to make sure each blade was cleared. Kofi paused the mower for a moment when he saw Evelyn step onto the porch, her slippers barely visible beneath the hem of her robe. The engine's hum faded as he cut the ignition and set down the mower's handle, wiping a bead of sweat from his brow. He straightened his cap and offered a polite nod. He had been working steadily for half an hour already, turning the grass into neat lines and trimming edges around the walk. Though he enjoyed the work, it left him warm and a little winded. The early morning sun glinted off the polished chrome of the mower's engine, and he took a moment to appreciate the calm of the neighborhood before greeting her. Evelyn's eyes shone with something between relief and weariness as she descended the few wooden steps from her porch. The soft boards creaked under her slippered feet. She clutched a glass of iced tea in one hand, offering it to Kofi with trembling kindness. "Would you like some iced tea?" she asked, her voice gentle. "It's cool and fresh." She lifted the glass toward him, condensation dripping onto her hand, and hoped he would accept. The sun had climbed higher in the sky, and the heat of midsummer was already building. Kofi wiped his hands on a clean cloth he kept tucked into his back pocket. He accepted the glass with gratitude. "Thank you, ma'am. That's very kind of you." He took a small sip. The cold sweetness was refreshing, and he let out a quiet sigh of relief before setting the glass on the top step beside her. "It's getting warm out here already," he said. "I appreciate it." Evelyn gave a small nod and touched the brim of her robe. Morning light made her silver hair glow softly around her face. "I know," she said. "I've been worried about you, working under the sun. Feel free to take breaks whenever you need." She paused, studying his face as if recognizing something familiar in his features. "You're doing a wonderful job," she added, looking toward the lawn where half the grass lay neatly cut. He glanced toward the front yard. The contrast between the uncut grass and the trimmed section was dramatic. "Thank you," he said, his voice warm and respectful. He took another small sip of tea and placed the empty glass on the porch railing. Then he picked up his trimmer and walked gingerly down the steps, leaving the glass behind. "If you don't mind, I'll keep going until I finish this area." He patted the trimmer's handle, checking its fuel gauge. "I'll refill my gas can in a bit, but I should have plenty to finish this side." "All right," Evelyn said softly. She placed both hands on her robe, folding her arms lightly. "Please let me know if you need anything. I have water and more tea inside." He offered her a polite nod, then returned to his work. The trimmer hummed to life as he knelt and began clipping the stubborn grass along the driveway's edge. The whirring sound mixed with the distant hum of passing cars and the chirping of birds in the tall oak trees lining the street. As he worked, Evelyn watched from the porch. The sight reminded her of mornings with Samuel, her late husband, when he would kneel in the grass humming quietly as he planted seeds or clipped weeds. A gentle ache spread through her chest and she drew a shaky breath. After a few minutes, Kofi straightened and paused. He glanced up and saw Evelyn still standing on the porch watching him. He offered another nod, and she beckoned him back toward the steps. He set the trimmer aside, cleaned the blades with a small brush he carried, and climbed the steps slowly, sweat darkening the fabric of his uniform at the back. Evelyn met him at the top, holding a large glass pitcher of iced tea and a small plate of sliced lemons. "I thought you might like a refill," she said, her voice quiet. "It's homemade tea, sweet, with just a hint of lemon." She poured the tea into a fresh glass and handed it to him, setting the pitcher on a small table next to a porcelain vase of fading roses that had once belonged to her husband. Kofi offered the glass a gentle smile and raised it in thanks. He, glanced at the roses and felt a pang of empathy. He knew how it felt to lose someone important, though his own loss had been years ago. "Thank you," he said, wiping his mouth with the back of his hand. "It's perfect." He took a sip, savoring the cool sweetness. "Your roses are beautiful." Evelyn's lips curved in a small, bittersweet smile. They were his favorite. She nodded toward the faded petals and ran her finger along the rim of the vase. They're a little past their prime, but I can't seem to let them go. She glanced away, looking out at the half-mown lawn, and then back at him. My husband used to tend to everything here with such care. He always knew exactly when to plant and prune, how to keep the yard looking its best. I miss him terribly some days. Kofi set his tea on the small table and took a step toward her, resting a hand lightly on the vase. I'm so sorry for your loss, he said, keeping his voice gentle. He sounds like he was a caring man. I wish I had known him. He glanced down at her hands, noticing how she held herself with quiet dignity, even as her shoulders slowly sagged with grief. He must have cared for this place with love. Evelyn nodded, holding back a sudden rush of tears. Yes, he did. He built this house with his own hands. He planted these flowers and trees, and he took care of every detail. When he passed away, it felt as if the spirit of the home left with him. Her voice trembled, and she brushed a tear from her cheek. She took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. I tried to keep up with the yard after he was gone, but it's not the same. I just can't do it like he did. Kofi's heart clenched as he listened. He remembered how his own father had taken such pride in his work clothes and toolbox, how he hammered nails as if they were an orchestra, each strike ringing with purpose. I understand, he said softly. I'll do my best to honor his memory by taking good care of your yard. He paused, then added, and if there's anything else you need, watering those roses, trimming the flower beds, just let me know. Evelyn's eyes softened. She glanced down at her slippers as though she felt uncertain whether she should speak again. Then she met his gaze and said, Thank you, Kofi. You're very kind. She offered a small smile that did not reach her eyes. It means a lot to me to see someone treat this place with respect. Kofi nodded, feeling a warmth bloom in his chest at the trust she placed in him. He lifted his glass for another sip, careful not to splash any tea. The porch's shade provided a few moments of coolness before he set the glass back on the table. I'll head back out and finish up, he said. Let me know if you need more tea or water. He turned and walked down the steps, pausing, once more to look back. Thank you again for the tea, ma'am. She watched him move toward the table where freshly trimmed patches of grass and clumps of weeds rested in small piles. The sight of him working reminded her of Samuel's familiar silhouette, his strong arms, the way he stood upright, the soft curve of his smile when she brought him a drink. She swallowed hard, trying to hold back the sudden rush of memory. Then she walked back inside and sat down at the table near the window, looking out as Kofi resumed his work. A short while later, Kofi finished trimming the edge of a flower bed on the far side of the yard. He set down his tools and approached the porch for a break. Evelyn stood carrying 2 glasses of water this time. She placed one on the table next to him. He took it gratefully, wiping his mouth again before taking a long drink. The water was clear and cold. Outside, the sun had risen higher, casting sharp shadows across the lawn. For a moment, they were silent, listening to the distant buzz of lawnmowers from neighboring yards and the gentle rustle of leaves in the breeze. Then Evelyn spoke softly. I wonder, do you ever see faces that remind you of someone you've lost? She looked at him, and her eyes shone with a curious mix of longing and hesitation. Kofi paused, his brow furrowing slightly. He set down his glass and put his hand on his lap. Sometimes, he admitted quietly, some days, I see people who remind me of my father. He passed away when I was young, but I still remember his face, his voice. He paused, considering his next words. Why do you ask? She took a deep breath, her eyes fixed on his face. It's just, sometimes, memory can be tricky, she said. I had a dream last night, and in that dream I saw my husband, Samuel, standing in the yard humming as he mowed the grass. When I woke up, I felt that he was still here somehow. She paused, gathering courage. When you handed me that first glass of iced tea, I saw in your face. She closed her eyes briefly, and when she opened them, her gaze was steady. You resemble my late husband very much. It startled me. Kofi's breath caught. He reached up and pressed a finger to his lips, thinking carefully before he spoke. I'm flattered that you would say that, he said softly. I can't say I knew your husband, but I'm honored by the comparison. He offered a small, gentle smile, though his eyes showed surprise. My father's name was also Samuel. He passed when I was a boy. I've never met another man who shares his name. He paused, then added, People have told me before that I resemble him, but I always thought it was just what a son looks like when he grows older. Still, hearing it from someone who loved her husband, it means a lot. Evelyn looked down at her hands, folding her fingers together. I don't know what it is, she said quietly. Maybe it's just my mind playing tricks on me. But when I see you working in the yard, kneeling to trim the edges, carefully sweeping the clippings, it's as if I see him, his build, his posture. I know it's silly, but it felt real. She met his gaze again. Kofi finished the last sweep of grass clippings and stood upright, brushing his hands on his pants to remove any loose bits. The morning sun had risen higher, casting a warm glow over the yard, and beads of sweat dotted his forehead. He paused to wipe his face with the back of his hand and looked up to see Evelyn stepping onto the porch. Her eyes were softer than before, and for a moment, she gazed at him as if trying to see beyond the uniform and the lawnmower. He felt a slight flutter in his chest as she drew closer, carrying a small photograph in her hand. May I show you something, Kofi? She asked quietly, her voice carrying a mix of hesitation and resolve. He set down the broom he had been carrying and nodded. Of course, he replied gently, stepping onto the porch steps so she could hand him the photo without bending. He took the image from her and studied it. The photograph was old, slightly faded around the edges. In it stood a man with broad shoulders and a warm smile, his arm draped over a younger man who looked almost identical. The younger man's face held the same shape as Kofi's, the same twinkle in his eyes. Evelyn watched him closely, her gaze filled with longing and hope. This was my Samuel, she whispered, pointing to the older man. His straw hat sat at a tilt, and his posture was confident yet gentle. And this is his brother, Sammy. She tapped the younger man's shoulder. He used to work at the steel plant down the road. They were very close, more than brothers, true friends since childhood. Kofi's breath caught at the sight. He recognized the man on the right immediately, his own father, Samuel Green. He had seen him only in a few old family photos, but this image captured the same warm expression he had heard described so many times. Unable to speak, Kofi's hand trembled slightly as he handed the photo back to Evelyn. His eyes were wide as he stared at her, and he swallowed hard. Your husband's brother is my father, he managed to say, his voice hushed. I had no idea. Evelyn nodded, her own eyes glistening. Yes, she said, her voice unsteady. After your father moved away, we lost touch. Samuel and Sammy wrote letters for a time, but when your dad went overseas, the letters stopped. We tried to find him, but he never returned. She took a deep breath and continued as if the words were difficult to push out. My husband always kept that photo by his bedside. He said it reminded him of the life he had before we moved here, before I met him. Sammy was like a brother to him, even though they had different last names. Kofi felt the tears welling up in his eyes. He looked away, blinking rapidly to clear his vision. He passed when I was young, he said, his voice cracking. I was only 8 years old. I barely remember his face, but I have photos at home. I thought he had no surviving family, that my mother was the last of the Greens. He paused, gathering his thoughts. When I signed up with Green Thumb Lawn Care, I never imagined I would end up here mowing the yard of my own uncle's widow. It feels like the world is smaller than I ever thought. Evelyn reached out and gently rested her hand on his arm. You're not just a worker here, Kofi, she said softly. You're family. Her words settled in the air like a warm breeze. She guided him back toward the porch steps and motioned for him to sit on one of the wooden chairs. Kofi did so, his heart pounding. Evelyn knelt beside him and placed her hand over his. Would you like to hear more about them? She asked. He nodded, and she took a deep breath before she began. My Samuel was always a hard worker. She explained, her tone steady. He grew up in a small town nearby. He met your father when they were in grade school. They both loved baseball and spent summers playing in empty lots, dreaming of playing in big stadiums one day. Kofi listened intently, picturing two young boys with dusty knees sharing dreams and laughter. He could almost see his father's face, younger and fuller, standing beside the boy who would grow up to be Evelyn's husband. They graduated high school together. Evelyn continued. Your father got a scholarship to study engineering, and my Samuel took a job at the factory. He was always practical, always steady. She paused, looking at the photo again. When Sammy got married, Samuel was his best man. I remember how proud Sammy was to have Samuel by his side. They danced and laughed that night until the band packed up their instruments at dawn. Evelyn's lips curved into a sad smile. After that, they stayed in touch through letters. Your father moved to the city and they wrote about their new lives, new jobs, new friends. My Samuel wrote to him about how he met me, how he fell in love. Kofi's eyes softened, and he felt tears slip down his cheeks. He brushed them away, quickly, not wanting Evelyn to feel he was intruding. I never knew any of this, he whispered. I only have blurry memories of my father's face. I remember his voice when he sang lullabies to me, and I remember the way he fixed broken appliances around the house. But I never knew he had a brother who loved him so much. He looked at Evelyn with a mixture of gratitude and grief. Thank you for telling me. She squeezed his arm reassuringly. I'm glad you're here so we can piece together their stories. It's like finding lost pages of a book we both thought was closed. She stood and motioned toward the yard. Why, don't you sit here with me on the porch a bit longer? I want to show you something else. Kofi followed her gaze and saw a small wooden box on a table near the door. Evelyn retrieved it and carried it to the chair where Kofi sat. She knelt again and opened the box carefully, revealing a collection of yellowed letters tied together with a faded ribbon. These are their letters, she said gently, lifting the bundle. They wrote to each other nearly every month for a while. When Sammy went overseas, there are fewer letters, just one or two that we sent to him. But I kept them all, thinking maybe one day someone would want to read them. She untied the ribbon and selected the top letter, unfolding it with care. The paper was thin and fragile, its edges frayed. The handwriting was neat, written in black ink that had faded to gray over time. She read aloud from one letter, her voice soft but clear. Dear Sammy, I hope this letter finds you well in England. The house feels quiet without you here. Every night I sit on the porch and remember how we used to fish by the riverbank. I miss your jokes and the way you always made me laugh. Evelyn and I send our love. Stay safe, my brother. Yours truly, Sam. Kofi listened, closing his eyes as the words washed over him. He imagined his father reading that letter in a foreign land, hearing the voice of his older brother who missed him dearly. He felt a lump in his throat when Evelyn finished reading. You have a wonderful gift for keeping memories alive, he said softly. Even though I never met him, I can feel his love through these letters. Evelyn nodded, folding the letter and returning it to the pile. They meant everything to each other. After your father passed, there were messages from his colleagues and friends, but none from someone who understood him like Samuel. When I saw them together in that photograph, I knew there was something I had to do, to share their story with you. She paused, her eyes glistening as she met his gaze. I think they would have been so proud to have you here, carrying on their legacy by caring for this home. Kofi felt a surge of emotion, gratitude, sadness, and a sense of belonging he had never known. He placed his hand over Evelyn's and gave it a gentle squeeze. I don't know what to say, he murmured. I'm grateful you kept these letters all this time. It means more than I can put into words. Evelyn smiled warmly, though tears glistened in her eyes. She rose and walked back toward the house. Let me make us some lemonade, she offered. It's cooler than tea on a day like this. We can sit in the shade while we read more. Kofi agreed, and she returned moments later with 2 tall glasses of pale yellow lemonade, the condensation beating on the outside. They sat together in comfortable silence as Kofi took his first sip. The tart sweetness was refreshing, and he felt the cool liquid ease the tightness in his throat. As they drank, Evelyn took another letter from the box and began reading. This one was from Sammy, written from a base camp in a distant country. His words were filled with excitement about seeing new places, but also tinged with homesickness. He described the taste of tea in a foreign cafe, and the strange but beautiful flowers he saw in a market. He wrote of missing his brother and his new wife, and he sent his love to Evelyn. Kofi listened, picturing his father as a young man, brave and curious, exploring the world yet longing for home. When the letter ended, Evelyn closed the box and held it gently in her lap. "There are many more," she said softly, "but I want you to know how much your father meant to Samuel and how much Samuel meant to him." She looked at Kofi with a smile that carried both sorrow and joy. "In many ways, your presence here feels like a gift I never expected. Everything comes together in ways we can't always understand." Kofi nodded, feeling a lump in his throat. He realized that through this unexpected connection, he had found a piece of himself he thought was gone forever. He placed his hand over the box of letters, feeling its weight and the history contained within. "I'll treasure these," he said quietly. "I promise to keep their memories alive." Evelyn's smile grew, and she reached over to hug him, gently. Kofi stiffened at first, not used to such close contact, but then he relaxed. The next few days passed gently, like a soft wind through tall grass. Evelyn found herself smiling more often. Every time she looked at her front yard, now neatly trimmed and green, she thought of Kofi, not just as the young man who mowed her lawn, but as someone deeply connected to her past. It was strange how one moment, one conversation could bring back so many memories and change the way she saw the world. She sat by her window one afternoon, holding a warm cup of tea, when she saw Kofi walking up the sidewalk again. He wasn't scheduled to come back for lawn work that day, but he carried a small cloth bag and wore a thoughtful expression on his face. Evelyn opened the door before he could knock. "Kofi," she said with a smile. "What a nice surprise. I hope I'm not bothering you," he said softly. "I was nearby and thought I'd stop in. I brought something I wanted to share with you." "Come in, dear," she said, stepping aside. "You're always welcome here." They walked into the kitchen, where the scent of lavender soap lingered in the air. Evelyn placed her tea on the table and motioned for Kofi to sit. He reached into the cloth bag and pulled out a small leather-bound album. The corners were worn and the cover had faded, but it was clearly special to him. "I found this in my mother's storage box," he said, opening it carefully. "It's my father's photo album. My mom gave it to me when I turned 20, but I never really looked through it until now. I thought maybe you'd recognize someone inside." Evelyn leaned closer, adjusting her glasses as he turned the pages. Black and white photos stared up at them. Young men in uniforms, smiling women at picnics, and a few faded letters tucked between the pages. Then she gasped and pointed to one picture. "That's him," she whispered. "That's Samuel, your father, and beside him that's my husband." Her finger hovered above the photo. "This must have been taken before our wedding. I remember that striped tie Samuel wore. He loved that tie." Kofi smiled, nodding. "I've never seen this one before, but now it feels like I've found a piece of both of them, your husband and my father." He closed the album gently. "I wanted to thank you again for letting me know who he really was to others. I used to feel like there were so many blanks in my family story, but now I feel like those blanks are being filled." Evelyn placed her hand over his. "And I'm thankful to you. You brought a light into this house that I hadn't felt in a long time. You remind me not just of Samuel, but of the love and friendship they shared. I believe there was a reason you came here." They sat in silence for a moment, feeling the weight of history and the comfort of connection. Then Evelyn stood up suddenly. "Wait here," she said. "There's something I want to give you." She disappeared into the hallway and returned. A few minutes later, carrying a small wooden box wrapped in a soft cloth, she placed it on the table and slowly opened it. Inside were old baseball cards, 2 pocket knives, and a silver whistle. Kofi's eyes widened. "These belong to your father and my Samuel," she said, her voice quiet and full of emotion. They used to trade these cards when they were kids, and that whistle, they used it when they played games in the neighborhood park. Samuel always kept this box safe. Kofi reached inside and gently lifted one of the cards. The corners were worn, but the player's image was still clear. He ran his thumb along the edge and felt a strange sense of joy and sorrow all at once. "I can't believe these survived all these years," he said. "Thank you, Evelyn. I'll take care of them." "I know you will," she replied. "That's why I want you to have them. You're their legacy now." Just then, the front doorbell rang. Evelyn looked surprised. "I wasn't expecting anyone," she said as she walked to the door. When she opened it, a young woman stood there holding a bouquet of sunflowers and a small card. "Delivery for Mrs. Carter," she said cheerfully, handing over the flowers. Evelyn took the bouquet and read the card. Her eyes watered. "It's from my daughter," she said. She remembered the anniversary. "Samuel and I were married on this day 45 years ago." Kofi stood and approached quietly. "Would you like to visit his resting place today?" he asked gently. "If you don't mind the company, I'd be honored to go with you." Evelyn looked at him, her heart full. "Yes, I'd like that very much." They left together, the bouquet cradled in Evelyn's arms. The cemetery was quiet, with rows of headstones stretching out under the afternoon sun. Birds chirped in the trees, and the breeze carried the scent of grass and flowers. They reached Samuel's resting place, a simple stone with his name carved cleanly into the granite. Evelyn knelt and placed the bouquet at the base of the stone. "Happy anniversary, my love," she whispered. "You'd never believe who I've met." Her voice trembled but carried warmth. Kofi stood behind her, hands folded. After a moment, he knelt beside her and bowed his head. "Thank you for raising such a good man," he whispered, "and thank you for being my father's brother." They sat there for a long time, speaking little but feeling everything. As the sun began to dip lower in the sky, they stood and walked back to the car. On the ride home, Evelyn shared more stories about her wedding day, about the first dinner Samuel cooked for her, and how they used to sit on the porch and watch the stars. When they returned to her house, the porch lights had come on. Evelyn paused before going inside. "Would you like to stay for dinner?" she asked. "I was thinking of making Samuel's favorite, baked chicken and mashed potatoes." Kofi's face lit up. "I'd love to." Inside, the house was filled with the scent of cooking, the sounds of laughter, and the warmth of shared memories. Evelyn moved through the kitchen with surprising energy, chopping vegetables and stirring sauces. Kofi offered to help, and together they set the table just like family. As they sat down to eat, Evelyn raised her glass of lemonade. To Samuel, and to Sammy, and to the next chapter. Kofi raised his glass with a smile. To family. They clinked glasses, and in that simple act, 2 generations came together, bound by history, memory, and the powerful reminder that love can echo across time in the most unexpected ways. ChatGPT said, "The next Sunday morning brought soft golden light filtering through the kitchen curtains. The air felt peaceful, with birds singing just beyond the windows and the gentle hum of life beginning outside. Evelyn was up early, wearing a light blue dress that had once been Samuel's favorite. It had small white flowers along the edges, and she hadn't worn it in a long time, but today felt special. She moved around her kitchen, setting plates, arranging flowers in a simple glass vase, and preparing ingredients. Her hands worked slowly but with care. On the table, she laid out recipes written in Samuel's own handwriting. His neat script covered the yellowed paper, notes about seasoning, oven temperature, and cooking times. These recipes had filled their home with warm, comforting smells for many years. Today she was cooking his favorite meal, baked chicken with rosemary, creamy mashed potatoes, buttered green beans, and warm cornbread. She hadn't made this full meal since Samuel passed. But now, with Kofi in her life, it felt right to bring those memories back, not with sadness, but with warmth and thankfulness. Around noon, there was a soft knock at the door. Evelyn wiped her hands on her apron and opened it. Kofi stood there with a shy smile, holding a foil-covered dish in both. Ans. I brought cornbread, he said. It's my mom's recipe. She used to make it with your husband's favorite, honey butter. Evelyn smiled wide and stepped aside to let him in. Come on in, Kofi. You're right on time. He stepped inside and looked around the kitchen. The smell of rosemary and garlic filled the air, and soft jazz music played on the old radio on the counter. Evelyn's eyes lit up when she saw the cornbread. Samuel would be smiling right now, she said. He always said a meal wasn't complete without good cornbread. They laughed together, and for a moment it felt as though the house itself was remembering too. Soft creaks in the floor, the smell of comfort food, and the easy company of two people who had found something deeply meaningful in each other. Kofi set the cornbread on the counter and helped Evelyn carry the food to the table. The sunlight pouring through the windows touched everything with a soft glow. They sat together, and Evelyn closed her eyes for a moment before they began. Would you mind if we said a few words before eating? She asked softly. Kofi nodded. Please. Evelyn folded her hands and took a slow breath. Thank you, Samuel, she whispered, for the life we shared, for the love that still lives here. And thank you, Lord, for bringing this young man into my life, someone who carries pieces of the past and helps carry it forward. Kofi's eyes misted over. He didn't speak, but gave a small nod of agreement, feeling the depth of her words settle in his heart. They began to eat, passing dishes between them, sharing quiet stories as they went. Evelyn told him about the first time she had tried to cook for Samuel and accidentally burned the chicken. Kofi laughed and told her about his father once mistaking salt for sugar when baking a pie. With every bite, every laugh, the space between past and present felt smaller. It wasn't about sadness anymore. It was about remembering with joy, about honoring those who were gone by living fully in the present. After lunch, they moved to the porch with glasses of sweet iced tea. The sun was warm but not harsh, and the soft breeze carried the scent of fresh-cut grass and blooming flowers. The roses Samuel had planted were beginning to open, their soft petals glowing in the light. Evelyn rocked gently in her chair, her hands wrapped around her glass. You know, she said, there were days after Samuel passed when I didn't speak to anyone for hours. Some days I wouldn't open the curtains. I felt like the world had moved on without me. Kofi nodded. I know that feeling. After my father passed, everything around me kept going. School, work, the neighbors. But it felt like something inside me had stopped. They sat quietly for a moment, both lost in their thoughts. But then, Evelyn said, you showed up. Just a man with a lawnmower, and somehow it felt like Samuel was saying, you're not alone, I'm still watching, still sending good people your way. Kofi looked down, touched by her words. I didn't expect this when I came to mow a lawn, he said with a small smile. But now I feel like I've found something I didn't even know I was missing, a connection, a story I'm part of. Evelyn reached over and gently touched his arm. You're family now, Kofi. Not by blood, maybe, but in every way that matters. He gave a small laugh. My mom would be proud to hear that. Later, that afternoon, Evelyn brought out the box of letters again. They sat together reading them, one by one. Some letters were funny, filled with old jokes and news about school dances and baseball games. Others were serious, speaking about dreams, fears and memories they didn't want to lose. Kofi took one letter and read it aloud. It was from his father to Samuel, written shortly before he moved overseas. You've always been the steady one, Sam. I chase dreams, and you plant roots. I know you'll take care of your family the way you took care of mine. No matter where I go, you'll always be my brother. As Kofi read the last line, his voice cracked slightly. He stopped and looked at Evelyn, who simply nodded with understanding. That's who they were, she said softly. Brothers, even if not by blood. And now you carry their kindness, their patience, their love for others. The sun began to dip low in the sky, casting long shadows across the porch. Kofi stood and began gathering the empty glasses and plates. I should get going, he said gently, but I'll be back next week to take care of the lawn. Evelyn stood as well, her hands resting on the porch railing. "I'm not worried about the lawn anymore," she said. "I'm just glad you'll be coming back." He smiled and gave her a light hug, gentle and respectful. As he walked down the path toward his truck, Evelyn watched him go. The trimmed grass beside the walkway looked perfect, the flowers standing proud. She felt the familiar ache of missing Samuel, but it was softer now, less sharp. There was peace in her heart, peace in knowing that memories could bloom again, even after loss. Kofi glanced back and waved. Evelyn waved back, then turned to go inside. She paused one last time, looking at the photograph on the table, Samuel and Sammy, standing side by side, full of life. And now their son's connection had brought those memories back to life. As the door closed gently behind her, Evelyn whispered, "Thank you." Outside, the breeze rustled the trees, and the world felt just a little more complete than before.